Hello everyone, welcome, I'm Jorbs. I've played a lot of Slay the Spire in my life, like between 5,000 and 6,000 hours, and played the game at the highest level for 3+ years, often setting what the highest level is. I wanted to make a video looking through some runs from August of last year to February of this year, where I managed to have 5 different world record streaks in the course of 6 months of play. And I actually played 500 hours of Among Us during those 6 months, so I wasn't even like a full-time Spire player during that time. I am almost 1,000,000% certain that I have the most world record streaks historically in the game. I'm around 15 total, I think. But I have never had this many world record streaks in this little time. And obviously, as part of them being world record streaks, they are the most wins in a row on these characters that have ever been played. So I'd never won this many runs on these characters before either. Part of the reason for so many world records happening is that there is a tendency for this game to have major patches every 6 months or so, which make the game easier. And that was true last year as well. Patch 2.2 generally buffed quite a lot of cards and made the game easier to win on Silent especially, although I'd say just generally on all of the characters overall because of a few buffs to general things. And yeah, pretty much everybody got a buff of some sort. Ironclad, Silent, Defect. I'm not sure if Watcher got any buffs, but she really didn't need any. So, let's talk about Ironclad first. The biggest thing I would say that is unique about my Ironclad win streak here is that I was boss relic trading basically every run at the time that I set this Ironclad win streak. This was early on in the patch. I'm not anywhere near as convinced that it's correct now as I was then. I'm not boss relic swapping every time anymore. Ironclad's boss relic gives you 6 HP every fight, which is actually a pretty big deal in Act 1 and 2. It tends to not matter as much in Act 3, especially for winning Ironclad runs. Winning Ironclad runs often have Reaper or Feed and just don't need that sustain all that much anymore. But to get through Act 1 and 2, it is a very significant 6 health every fight. If you look at this act, there are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 fights in Act 1, so that's 54 health there. 48 leading into the boss fight. And that's a big deal. And generally, I would say that an average boss relic does give you more value than that, but you have to consider that on top of choosing to swap your relic for a boss relic at the whale, you're also choosing not to take something like upgrade a card or get a common relic, or there are just lots of generically good whale bonuses, and some whale bonuses which are a little bit high risk reward, but also on average very good, other than boss relic swapping. So you are giving up something to go for this. On top of that, Ironclad has some self-damage synergy stuff that's being buffed. I did not use it very much in this win streak, and overall I feel that it's still not actually very strong. But the fact that it was buffed does mean that you're more likely to get into builds which deal you damage, and when you're dealing yourself damage, especially if you're building into something that deals you damage early on in a run, before you have sustain and a max HP and stuff to defend yourself, having that 6 HP sustain every fight can be a pretty big deal. Yeah. But for this win streak, which as far as I know is the most wins anybody has ever had in a row with Ironclad at Ascension 20 killing the heart, I was trading boss relic every time. And this time I got Tiny House. Unfortunately, I don't actually know which card Tiny House gave me. The run history stuff here doesn't let me know, but Tiny House is not one of the best hits for a boss relic. We get a potion, 50 gold, 5 max HP, obtain a card, get a upgrade one of our cards. It's all fine, but it doesn't give us much power, and it generally doesn't give us much direction either. We're still looking for some other thing that's going to let us survive even the Act 1 elite fights. We haven't even solved those by picking up Tiny House usually. So, still a long way to go. On floor 1, I beat up Jawworm. I took a clothesline over Havoc and Clash. I think that's pretty straightforward, and hopefully everybody would think that that was sensible. And then on floor 2, beat up some small slimes and took a Flame Barrier and Explosive Potion over Wild Strike Dropkick. You can take Wild Strike here for sure. My tendency with Ironclad of late has been to tilt my deck toward defense as much as I can get away with. And that's a balancing act, because the Act 1 elite fights heavily punish you for building a defensive deck. Gremlin Knob in particular, you just need to deal 80 to 90 damage to Gremlin Knob quickly, and playing block cards is not going to work. So again, for that fight, something like a Wild Strike is much better than a Flame Barrier. It's possible that I just had a big damage card in my deck, and is the run where I had Offering? I don't know. But anyway, for whatever reason, perhaps the Explosive Potion, I felt that I could get away with taking Flame Barrier here, but I think the instructive thing is to recognize that it's not the case that either Flame Barrier or Wild Strike is always right here. It's the case that you probably want to have Flame Barrier in your deck for Act 2, but you may need to have Wild Strike in your deck for Act 1 still. It's not like one card is better than the other. One card is more targeted at Act 1, and one card is more targeted at Act 2. So, that's all cool. It is a Slime Boss act, so not a Hexaghost act. Hexaghost would make Flame Barrier even better. On floor 3, beat up a Cultist and took an Iron Wave over Wild Strike and True Grit. I think this is actually another really interesting choice. I believe the reason that I took Iron Wave, the general reason that I take Iron Wave early on in a run, is just feeling like I need some medium quality bridge card to get me through the early part of the run. Iron Wave is not a card that you're excited to play in late game at all. You will usually not be playing it when you draw it. And so we're almost adding a curse to our deck for late game, most likely. But that having been said, we already have a Clothesline and a Flame Barrier, which are two 2-cost cards, and so we're often going to have 1 energy left over in our turn, and we're often going to want to do something useful with that energy. Iron Wave costs 1, as something more useful than strikes or defends right now, so it's a good pickup in that spot. Could also take Wild Strike, could also take True Grit. Again, I'm trying to tilt my deck as defensively as possible at the moment, and I don't think I have to take Wild Strike, but I think True Grit's too defensive would be the explanation of why I was making that pick. Go to a merchant, buy a Potion Belt. Potion Belt's great. Pick up a Jutsu Bracelet from Scrap Ooze, that's fine. And upgraded Bash on floor 6. Bash is the typical upgrade first in Act 1 for Ironclad, just because it deals so much damage to upgrade Bash against Gremlin Knob and Lagavulin. Both of those are fights which are challenging for us, and this is the best upgrade available to us for making those fights easier. I could upgrade, say, there isn't really even an upgrade that's significantly better against sentries, unfortunately. But sometimes you can upgrade like a Wild Strike, which is a high damage upgrade, so that you have a card that's good in all 3 of the fights, because the Bash upgrade isn't that good against sentries, as they have an artifact charge. It's a larger upgrade than it looks like, though, because you go from having 2 energy, well, okay, you apply 2 vulnerable to something, but it costs you 2 energy to do it, right? So you have 4 energy left with which to play attacks against that vulnerable enemy before it stops being vulnerable. You've got 1 energy left this turn, and then 3 energy next turn. And you may need to like spend 2 energy on blocking in that time. So maybe you only actually have 2 energy with which to attack the enemy while it's vulnerable. Whereas if you upgrade it, all of a sudden you have an extra turn, so another 3 energy. You go from 4 energy to 7 energy. That's a 75% increase, not a 50% increase. And you're also at a point where you can spend 7 energy attacking something, you're going to be killing it at the end of that. So you can sink those last 3 energy into actually attacking the thing, usually, because you're at a point where it's going to be dead after you've attacked it, which means you don't have to block anymore. So, the bash upgrade's really good. We picked up a bag of marbles and a feed from Lagavulin, and honestly, when we pick up feed on floor 7, we've already started to snowball into a 1 run. Feed is tremendously strong. It's strong if you pick it up like 2 acts later, but the meta progression on this card when you pick it up early is just obscene. You're not just raising your max HP by 4, it also sustains you. When you raise your max HP in this game, your current HP goes up by the same amount. And so we're not only raising our max HP, but we're sustaining. When you rest in this game, or when you end an act, you gain HP based on how much your max HP is. Both of the equations for how much you heal consider what your max HP is, and you'll heal more if you have more max HP. And so we're getting sustain in fights, we're getting more sustain at campfires, we're getting more sustain every act, and we're getting more max HP for the boss gauntlet. And when you have all 4 of those things going on, the game gets a lot easier. Like, this is now an Ascension 10 run instead of an Ascension 20 run or something because of how strong this card is. And yeah, some of this stuff is gonna sort of be like, well, here are the first 3 steps and then draw the rest of the elephant, where I'm not gonna go in great detail through the rest of runs, which I think are mostly won already. But the general vibe here is we go through the rest of Act 1, we take a little bit of scaling, a little bit of block, we get a demon form from the slime boss, which is like fine, we're already at 96 HP here, and we pick up a curse key, so we have 4 energy now. And our Act 1 relics are not super good, but going into Act 2 with almost 100 HP gives you a lot of room to work with. And we were able to skirt through Act 3, or Act 2 rather. God, yeah, I think I said Act 3 because 100 HP seems like it would be obscene for Act 2, but we were able to get through Act 2. Picking up Battle Trance is huge, some card draw, picking up Shockwave is huge, apply Weaken Vulnerable to everything. Mutagenic Strength is actually pretty unusual for me to prioritize. More and more I've been transforming 2 cards in this event, because more and more I've been finding that so many cards have been buffed in this game since like 2 years ago when I started playing Ascension 15. I think that's when Ascension 15 came out. So many cards have been buffed, such that when you transform a strike and a defend, you're getting random cards, and it used to be that your random cards were quite likely to not be useful for your late game strategy, or even very useful now. Like, there were just a lot of cards that didn't help that much. But with so many cards being buffed, not only do you on average get a better card when you transform, because a lot of the bad cards have been buffed now, but also there are so many more ways to craft a successful late game strategy. You're nowhere near as penned in to finding a particular 3 different cards which are only supported by 3 different other cards or something like that. Now it's more the case that something like Blood for Blood could be enough to win pretty easily. Something like Bloodletting, which gives you health, gives you energy for health. It gives you 1 more energy now. So something like Bloodletting, which used to be almost unusable, now becomes something that can be a part of quite a few different infinite builds. So it's like this, there's the immediate obvious buff, but then also everything in Slay the Spire connects to everything else. And so when you buff one thing, then all the things that are connected to it suddenly get stronger, and you get to a point where transforming cards becomes more appealing than it used to be by a large amount. So I'm a little bit surprised that I took Mutagenic Strength there, because I don't, looking at my deck, see anything that really hugely benefits from turn 1 Strength. It's possible that it was just like, I have the bag of marbles, I am struggling a little bit to deal damage, against Act 2 elites in particular, and so I wanted to get the extra probably 10 damage on turn 1 out of the mutagenic strength. And maybe that's enough, yeah. Maybe that's enough. We got a True Grit. This is actually an upgraded True Grit. True Grit's a good upgrade, especially with card draw, like we got the Battle Trance earlier in the act. True Grit lets us exhaust cards that we don't want for longer fights. Upgraded Demon Form. I'm just gonna go quickly through the rest of this. Got an Orichalcum. We got Council of Ghosts for 3 apparitions. Council of Ghosts is usually very strong, and when you have Feed, it's even stronger, because the drawback on Council of Ghosts is that you get to a point where you have the ability to get one shot. Like if you're at 35 max HP, there are going to be turns where you get attacked for more than that. And if you draw 5 attacks, you're dead. So with Feed, we not only get 3 turns of intangible, but we also have the ability to get our max HP back and be safe. Got a Burning Pact, excellent card. Got an Exhume, so we have some sort of exhaust synergy things going on here. I don't believe I ever got... Oh, I did eventually get a Feel No Pain as well, but Exhume's very good with Offering, very good with Feed, very good with Apparitions, so Exhume's a card where usually this is going to become very powerful by the end of a winning run. It won't be very strong in a lot of your losing runs, and there's an interesting inflection point there where for a card like this, you sort of are often looking at it and thinking, this card isn't strong yet, but in all of the universes I can imagine where I won this run, it would get strong. So maybe I take it even though it's not strong yet. Where the downside, of course, is I'm making it more likely that I live in a universe where I have no chance to win the run if I take Exhume over something like an Immolate, maybe, where Immolate helps me to get through Act 2. But in all the universes where I do end up with winning synergies, Exhume's going to be a tremendously powerful card, and so we take it to make sure that the runs where I would have had 75% chance to win, I instead have 90% chance to win, and we dismiss the fact that in some runs where I had, 20% chance to win, I now have 15% chance to win. Yeah, but in this situation, Exhume is just already incredibly good. And then we got a Snecko-Eye. Snecko-Eye is, I think, the strongest boss relic in the game consistently on Ironclad still. It used to be the case that Snecko-Eye was just always the strongest boss relic on everybody, pretty much. But when Watcher was released, Watcher doesn't play super well with Snecko-Eye. And with card buffs on Silent and on Defect, I think that it is no longer incredibly powerful on either of those characters either. So we're now down to it probably still being the best boss relic on aggregate for Ironclad, although somewhat situationally. Here I have a Battle Trance, I eventually have an Offering. These cards don't love Snecko-Eye. Ironclad also, I would say maybe 20% of the time, ends up winning with some sort of infinite combo, which Snecko-Eye doesn't like either. So there are things that Ironclad doesn't like about Snecko-Eye, I would say more so than there used to be, but it's still very, very good. It's good to draw 2 additional cards every turn. It helps. This is a deck with a Demon Form in it, so we draw Demon Form like a turn earlier on average and get to put it in play. And that's really good. Went through all this stuff. Got a Feel No Pain Plus is a pretty big deal. The Lizard Tail's nice for sure. And this deck never really got tons and tons and tons of max HP back. I think it was struggling a little bit in Act 3. Ended up taking 57 damage against the Weekend one, and then actually dying against Onudeka, but fortunately I had picked up a Lizard Tail. And made it into Act 4 with only 9 HP. So, what went wrong here is largely that I failed to find a Corruption, and failed to find significant ways to block. There's no Disarm in this deck, there's only one Feel No Pain, and the Feel No Pain doesn't have the ability to often have cards exhaust, because I don't have corruption. I don't have like a fiend fire or anything either. There's no barricades, so if I do get a good block turn put together, there's no way to really use Entrench to win the run from there or anything. The deck's just not that good at blocking, and that was, you know, what made us take so much damage against these boss fights. It just couldn't defend against them. We've got this apparitions, of course, which is why we're able to deal with holy fights and elite fights much better, because the apparitions keep us alive through those. But in the boss fights, they're long enough that we have to have some sort of sustained block at some point, and we just sort of don't. But going into Act 4, we rested up to full. We bought a couple of speed potions, and did I have an artifact charge? I believe I had an artifact potion in my potion belt at this point, so I went into the final fight with 10 dexterity, and that was just enough. Took 11 damage from the corrupt heart. Speed potion, you can stop it from taking your dexterity away at the end of the turn. Speed potion gives you 5 dexterity until the end of turn, but it stacks up a debuff, or you're going to lose a certain amount of dexterity at the end of the turn. So I just stopped the 10 dexterity down with my artifact potion and won the heart fight. GG. So, I'm not going to spend that long on every run, but we were talking about a lot of things for the first time, and we're going to get to a point where we've talked about a lot of this stuff before, and I won't have to speak at length about it again, I'm pretty sure. Second Ironclad run, again, boss relic swapping. We got Slaver's Collar this time, extra energy for elite fights. This is fine. We want to be able to beat elites anyway. In general, I would say Ironclad is happy to take... Okay, the first 3 holy fights of Act 1 are from an easy pool. They're not very dangerous. You won't take much damage in them on any character with any deck, pretty much, within reason. But after the first 3 holy fights, you get into the hard holy fight pool in Act 1. And these fights can be quite tough. Some of them are like... they would be miserable fights if they showed up at the beginning of Act 2, let alone halfway through Act 1. So I would say Ironclad typically is okay with taking hard pull fights if he's likely to get a rare card from them, and if he has some good AoE damage. Something like an Immolate or a Whirlwind early is going to go a long way there. Some potions can help, stuff like that. But Ironclad's cards themselves are not incredible, I wouldn't say. I think Ironclad has the weakest cards of any of the 4 characters. Ironclad tends to have very strong interactions with relics, and also Ironclad has some rares which are superbly powerful, like Feed or Reaper or Corruption or Offering. Offering probably at a lower strength level than the other cards I just mentioned. I think the sub-theme of Ironclad cards, which strength scale, are strong insofar as they make Reaper even better, but I wouldn't say that building into them by themselves without a Reaper yet is as strong as something like building into a Corruption when you see a Corruption Act 1 is. Or Feed. Feed is obviously very, very good in Act 1. So, what I'm trying to say is, in general, I'm very happy if I can take elites in Act 1 as Ironclad, because a lot of my runs are going to be built around synergizing my deck with some sort of strong relic. Incense Burner, Captain's Wheel here in Act 1 mean that I don't need to worry anywhere near as much about building a deck that can block, especially prior to the boss gauntlet. Even in the boss gauntlet, these relics are incredibly strong against the heart. If I put Incense Burner on 4 at the start of the heart fight, I'm going to full block on turn 2 and have 18 free block on turn 3. So that's very, very strong. I have a Shuriken for some strength scaling. I have a Self-Forming Clay and an Orange Pellets for more defense. This is a run which wins based largely on its relics without even looking at what my cards are. And Ironclad's going to have a good number of runs like that. Especially given that some of Ironclad's strongest cards, like Feed and Reaper, tend to be more of a supportive, sustain-y type of role, rather than a this is how I win the fight type of role. So you can think about them as letting you exist in a fight for longer to get more value out of whatever else is in your deck, or whichever relics you happen to have available to you. So, that's all cool. This deck ended up going through the start of Act 1, picking up a Metallicize and a Feel No Pain early, which are two very strong defensive powers, so I've got a good amount of defense going on. Took a Sever Soul over a Warcry and a Feel No Pain on floor 5. Any damage is going to be good when you don't have enough damage to kill Gremlin Mob yet, and Sever Soul is particularly good with a Feel No Pain already in the deck because it will both deal damage and block. It's not the most damage that you're going to get for 2 energy, for sure. Something like a Carnage is going to deal significantly more damage. Fiend Fire, Immolate. Even like a Whirlwind is probably more exciting to be taking, and we can upgrade that, you know, but Sever Soul is fine. Not be too picky. Upgraded Bash again, went into our Sentries fight, only took 12 from it. Feel No Pain and Metallicize actually are cards that are defensive cards, and as such, you might at first glance think, I shouldn't be taking this before I go into Act 1 Elite fights, because Act 1 Elite fights I want to tilt my deck much more toward offensive potential. And it's true that if you're struggling to deal damage, you probably shouldn't be taking Feel No Pain or Metallicize over good attacks at the start of Act 1. But Metallicize and Feel No Pain both get a free pass against Sentry, or against Lagavulin, sorry, pretty much, because most of the time you're going to be able to draw them before you wake Lagavulin up. So in the Lagavulin fight in particular, powers are better than usual because you get to decide when the fight actually starts. Lagavulin will stay asleep for 3 turns if you don't attack it, so unless you get very unlucky and don't get your powers into play before turn 4, you do have the ability to chill out a little bit there. And also, Metallicize is legitimately just a very good card against Sentries, and Feel No Pain is incredible against Sentries because you draw so many dazes the second time through your deck. So the cards are only bad against Gremlin Mob, and even there, Metallicize is a non-skill way to block, and it will often block for 6 or even 9 damage against Gremlin Mob. So yeah, just those powers in particular are a nice way to get your deck kick-started on being able to defend before you've even solved the Act 1 Elite problem, because being able to defend well is generally an Act 2 problem that you have, or even an Act 2 boss problem if you're good at killing Act 2 Holy fights very quickly. And it generally isn't something that you try to solve in Act 1, but if you can get started on solving it in Act 1, that's great. And solving how to defend in a way that scales well into late game, like Feel No Pain does. Feel No Pain is a solution which works against the late game gauntlet as well, is just really, really nice. One of the other things, I just mentioned how transforming cards gets better because there are so many ways to build into something that wins late game. That's true here again. When you are able to solve an early game problem with a solution that scales well into a late game solution for the end game bosses, the run becomes much easier for you. And so taking a Feel No Pain and a Metallicize early, even though like Feel No Pain doesn't have that many exhaust cards, all it has in the starter deck is Ascender's Bane, which is going to exhaust for it. But you know, enemies put dazes into your deck and you'll find some exhaust cards probably. A third of Ironclad's cards have exhaust written on them, so unless you stop playing Ironclad, you're probably going to find some exhaust cards. Yeah, solving your early game problem like that makes it very easy to then build a deck which can solve its late game problems. Much easier than if you solved your early game block problem with something like a Shrug It Off. Shrug It Off is fine, it's an okay card late game, but it doesn't scale in the same way. So anyway, we got a Captain's Wheel and actually took a Body Slam from the Floor 7 Elite. I love being able to take a Body Slam early, but it's difficult too. It's hard for Ironclad to take a ton of block cards early. Ironclad doesn't have that many block cards. A lot of the good ones are uncommons, which are just sort of hard to find. And yeah, if I can get away with playing a Body Slam that's likely to hit for 10 or 15 in Act 1, I love that. Because Body Slam's a good attack to have for later if you're building a deck which blocks a lot. And you would like to be able to build a deck that blocks a lot, but often your problem with trying to build a deck that blocks a lot is that it can't deal damage to the Act 2 elites. Well, if you have Body Slam, now it can. Cool. That being said, usually you just can't take Body Slam. So here, especially with Captain's Wheel, giving Body Slam an automatic 18 damage if we draw it on turn 3, I think we can get away with taking it. And so yeah, that's cool. This is a situation where I skipped Exhume. So Exhume could have been maybe an okay pickup, but it's probably too early for it here. We just have too far ahead of us before we're expecting our deck to have 3 or 4 powerful exhaust cards to choose between when we play our Exhume. Rested, picked up an Incense Burner, absolutely premium relic, very, very, very good. Actually purchased a Hand of Greed on floor 11. Typically when I'm buying Hand of Greed, it's because 2 things are going on. One, my deck has fairly good control of fights, so I can choose when to end a fight. And in this situation, I want to be stalling fights anyway because I have this Incense Burner. I want to be able to set Incense Burner on 4 or 5 before the start of the next fight. I already have some decent block going on with Metallicize and Feel No Pain and Captain's Wheel, and I want to get more block because of Body Slam. So all of those things are making me want to stall fights longer, and then another reason to buy Hand of Greed is just that you need more damage. It just is a card that deals 20 damage for 2 energy, and this deck needs more damage still. And so those are the 2 reasons most likely that you're going to end up buying Hand of Greed in Act 1. The fact that it gives you gold is, like, it's nice, right? It's one of the minor sub-reasons that you buy it, but you shouldn't be walking into a store and thinking, ooh, I want to play a run where I just get 2,000 gold, so I'm going to buy Hand of Greed. You should be thinking about how Hand of Greed matches with what your deck's doing right now in order to be strong, or if it doesn't, it's probably pretty weak. It does cost $200 to buy it from the store, so not cheap. We got a Dark Embrace from our looter friend over Perfected Strike and Thunderclap, so 2 attack commons that I maybe would have needed if I hadn't bought Hand of Greed, but with Hand of Greed I don't really need to be picking up those attack commons anymore. Not nearly as much anyway, I have a lot of damage, and Dark Embrace is a tremendously good card. Dark Embrace is like very close to the power level of Feel No Pain. I would say maybe slightly below it most of the time early on in runs, but it's very, very close. It's one of those powers that you can almost always be taking even before Act 1 elites. Because even in the Act 1 elite fights, it tends to be okay. Bought a Lagavulin, got a Shuriken, and now we've got a little bit of strength scaling for ourselves as well. Transformed to Striking, got a Searing Blow. Not sure that's an improvement. And we beat Guardian, and we were offered Reaper, Limit Break, and Offering. There was a time in my life where I would have thought this was an interesting choice. But the more that I've played Ironclad in my life, the more clear it has felt to me that Reaper is just incredibly, incredibly, incredibly strong. Reaper is a card that takes runs which are middling and makes them not only able to win, because it's a very strong card in the end game against the bosses, but also able to snowball immediately, and that's a really big deal. Say I take Offering here. It's a card that probably gives my deck just immediately more help than Reaper does. I don't have a ton of strength in my deck. I've got like a Shuriken, but it's not that much. I don't have that much going on for Reaper just yet. And Offering is going to accelerate my deck a tremendous amount. I can't show you an Offering, but it's going to give me 3 cards and 2 extra energy the turn I play it. I have an Incense Burner, so sometimes it will only deal me 1 damage instead of 6. That's cool, right? The problem is with Offering, I'm going to go into Act 2, I'm going to draw it, I'm going to play it, my deck's going to be more powerful, but I gonna have to like rest all the time because my deck's still not gonna have a ton of sustain, and Offering is dealing me damage on top of that. With Reaper, all I need is like one fight against 3 bird cultists, and I'm gonna be full HP next act, basically. And then if I fight an elite, all I need is to draw Reaper on a decent turn against Slavers or Gremlin Leader, and boom, I'm full HP again. And then after that, all I need is a Centurion Mystic fight, and I'm full HP again. So this card isn't only strong for late game, but it immediately enables snowballing for me as I go through Act 2. And when I say snowballing, I mean the ability to take like every floor and every greedy option, like 4 elites without even considering going to a campfire types of things. These are enabled by Reaper and not possible when taking other cards. And I think as a streamer of this game who wants to play entertaining runs, I prioritize snowballing options even more than I should probably. When people talk about like who the best Slay the Spire player is, often a thing that they care about is win rate overall, and I think that I probably try to snowball runs at the expense of win rate sometimes because it's more fun, and I'm playing this game to have fun. I don't think that I do it in a way that's tremendously bad, like I don't think I'm giving up like 5% overall win rate or anything, but I think there are moments where it's close where I choose to go for a snowbally path which has some potential risk involved instead of going for the safer path, which might be slightly more likely to win in the end, but it's going to be like an hour-long grind, which is generally unenjoyable. So because of that of like always taken Reaper in situations like this a lot, maybe more than I should, and I have really noticed how much stronger it's getting as buffs happen to other cards. Reaper, like I said earlier talking about this run, is one of those cards which allows you to sustain in fights, which gives you more ability for the other strong things your deck is doing to exist. It lets you do other strong things you couldn't do without it, like for example getting 60 strength in a fight with Limit Break. If you don't have a Reaper to heal up at the end of doing that, you likely can't do it at all. And even if you're not like going to gain strength and get a tremendous stuff like that, if you can last in a fight for 6 turns in order to play your Hand of Greed or put Incense Burner on the right number or something like that, that's a big win as well. And Reaper lets you do that, and I feel like it lets you do that more as more stuff is getting buffed. More stuff getting buffed also just makes every fight easier overall, which lets you do more convoluted things in fights, which are powerful. So for example, playing Reaper on the right turn is a somewhat convoluted thing that you might not be able to do if fights weren't easier. Same sorts of arguments are true for Alchemize on Silent. Alchemize is much stronger now than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. We got a Runic Pyramid from The Guardian. Runic Pyramid plus 4 energy going into Act 2 is generally a recipe for a pretty easily one run, especially with a Reaper and an Incense Burner. We picked up an early spot weakness. Armaments is great with Pyramid. Often worth an upgrade with Pyramid as well. Picked up a Dark Shackles Combust and Blood Potion apparently. I don't think I have Self-Forming Clay or Rupture. But Combust is just like an okay card here, and if I hit Rupture, all of a sudden I have good strength gain, so I guess that's what I'm thinking probably. BU didn't take Vampires, because this is a deck that eventually got down to only 1 strike in it, so adding 5 bites to it at the cost of max HP. Max HP matters a lot when I have Reaper. It's not a great decision that time. We did upgrade armaments, we beat up Gremlin Leader. This is a run where I actually took 27 damage from Knowing Skull to give you a sense of how much I'm snowballing here. This is an event where when you hit it in Act 2, it's often a very bad floor. It deals you 6 damage just to leave, and usually you don't get to use it for anything before you leave. But here I was able to click on gain gold 3 times before leaving, and honestly I probably could have clicked on it more times, because I get self-forming clay from the treasure and then get a Centurion and Mystic and I'm basically full health again. So, picked up orange pellets at the merchant, very good with everything. Like, orange pellets is just obscenely powerful and there's almost never a run where it isn't incredibly, incredibly good. And got another Reaper from the champ, and, you know, once we have 2 Reapers, this gets pretty easy. This is a draw the rest of the elephant moment here, where I'm picking up a feed to gain max HP, I'm picking up Limit Break and upgrading it to have tons of strength for the late game, and we win against the heart. We took 61 damage and ended at full health, which is very typical of a deck which is strength scaling with Reaper. You don't have to block, right? Like, there's no reason not to take 61 damage if you are just going to heal all the damage back. So, even though this deck has some ability to block, when it has 138 max HP anyway, I don't have to play the block cards on turn 1 and turn 2. Hit me. Who cares? That was I would say a very typical looking Reaper Snowball Ironclad run. Alright, this is the first time that we got a truly powerful boss relic swap. I'd say that Runic Pyramid and Snecko Eye. Okay, so like Astrolabe, Pandora's Box, Runic Pyramid, Snecko Eye are typically going to be your best boss relic swap hits at this point in the history of the game. It used to be that when you boss relic swapped, you were more hoping for specifically Snecko Eye and Runic Pyramid, but now transforming cards is so strong that I think the transforming cards options are probably actually even better. But yeah, we got a Snecko Eye at the whale. Snecko Eye run is typically going to be a very easy one. We got a Flame Barrier, Combust, Power Through, Twin Strike, blah blah blah. Here we go. We got an Auric Alchem and a Bludgeon at Sentries, and I think the run's basically over at that point. They're just... we just take high value cards at this point and get decent relics and win. Got a Singing Bowl, which is very strong with Snecko Eye. Snecko Eye tends to lead to you skipping more often. The way that Snecko Eye works is all of your cards cost between 0 and 3 instead of their usual energy cost, right? And so because of that, the balance of the game breaks. Now, relative to how your cards work, some cards are incredibly, incredibly good. Like a Bludgeon, which deals 32 damage for between 0 and 3 energy, is way better than an Anger, which deals 6 damage for between 0 and 3 energy, right? And some of your cards are pretty bad, like the Anger, which deals 6 damage for 0 to 3 energy. And so, because you sort of break the balance of the game with Snecko Eye and have some cards which are incredibly good and some cards which are incredibly bad, much, much, much more so than without Snecko Eye, you end up building a deck which tries to focus on the best cards more and skips a lot. Whereas without Snecko Eye, you tend to build a deck which builds a lot of solid cards, which means that you don't skip that often, because you're often going to be offered one solid card in your card rewards. But yeah, Snecko Eye cares more about really getting strong stuff going, and this deck ends up doing that pretty nicely. The biggest hope for me when I get Snecko Eye on Ironclad is to get Corruptions, Demon Forms, and Reapers. And it looks like I got a Corruption, I got a Feed, but no Reaper. But I mean, that ends up being okay, I guess. Got a Pandora's Box at the end of Act 2. Unfortunately, it looks like the mod that tells you what Pandora's Box gives wasn't working at that time. Maybe I didn't have it installed yet. I mean it's installed, right? Yeah, it's definitely installed for this run because it tracked Nunchaku. But maybe Pandora's hadn't been added to it yet. It's a really cool mod, but it was still being developed at that point. So I actually took Corruption over Reaper, which is, I mean, I think fine. I would not always take Corruption over Reaper, but this is a situation where both of those cards are insanely, insanely powerful, and so it's going to just be a matter of working out which one is the strongest at the moment. I got a barricade and added an entrench to it. I got a fairly late feed, actually. Impervious helps a lot with the barricade. Took almost no damage from the boss fights. Took almost no damage from the shield and spear, and took 63 damage from the heart, which is, I would say, fairly typical of a deck that doesn't have like instance burner to help defend on turn 2 or 3. If you look at the ability of my relics to defend on turn 2 and 3, there just isn't one, really. I sort of can't do that. I don't have orange pellets. I don't have like a horn cleat or an instance burner or a buffer charge or anything like that. So it's very normal to take damage at the beginning of the heart fight with a deck like this, but you expect to stop taking damage after turn 3. Alright, so I believe that was run 3, right? I was gonna do all of these streaks, and I'm realizing now that I am absolutely insane and there is no possible way that I will do all of these streaks. So this is gonna have to be 5 different videos, I think, which is fun, I guess. I'll do 5 videos. 919. I wasn't playing that much Spire at this time. You may have noticed 829, 94, 912, 919. So I believe this was while I was playing a lot of Among Us. And, you know, that game was fun, but I also liked to drop in for a Spire run or two often at the beginnings of the stream. Something about me and Spire is I actually think I play my highest level of Spire 4 hours a day. 3 to 4 hours a day I play my highest level of Spire. And so for me, if I cared about maximizing my win rate, I would like play my 3 or 4 hours of Spire every day, and then I'd probably stop and go do something else. Maybe I'd take a break for an hour and then come back. For me, I sort of established as a routine when I was a professional poker player to play 3 or 4 hour sessions and then go for a walk and have some food for an hour or something like that, and then come back for another 3 or 4 hour session. And when I was really working super hard as a professional poker player, I would play 3 sessions like that per day. So I'd work 9 to 12 hours and then have 2-hour-long breaks in between, basically. And yeah, for me, when I'm streaming, you like to have the channel up for like 6 to 7 hours. Let people come in and enjoy the show. And breaking up the show into chunks throughout the day is just sort of disruptive to viewers, so it's not a great thing to do. So yeah, for me as a streamer, I will play Slay the Spire for 6+ hours a day sometimes, but it's with the knowledge that I'm not going to be winning nearly as much if I do so. And generally, even if I'm not like on a world record streak, often I treat Slay the Spire more as like a time to hang out and chat with people and have fun. I'm not necessarily trying super hard to win every single run. You're gonna find out more about this next run, foreshadowing. So I set 2 world record streaks during this period while not playing very much Slay the Spire. I was playing like 3 to 4 hours a day. And I think that's just because when I play little Slay the Spire, I have more interest in focusing intently on exactly what's going on in the run, and I have more brain power to do it. I think that's like very causal. One of the reasons that I don't focus on win rate and try to maximize my win rate and try to judge myself or other people based on their Slay the Spire win rates is that I know that for me, the behavior that would maximize my win rate isn't very fun for my viewers and isn't very fun for me. So that's all whatever. Hopefully setting 5 world records in 6 months is enough to establish that I'm still okay at the game. Kappa. So we hit Snecko again off our boss relic swap, which is awesome. This is why you hit the boss relic swap, is in the hopes that you'll get one of the good ones, and you know, you've got in the vicinity of a 1 in 6 basically to get one of the good ones. Maybe slightly better, maybe slightly worse, depending on which ones you think are good and which ones you think aren't good. And this Neko I run has a Heavy Blade, Uppercut, and Clothesline by floor 4, so we're already incredibly good at dealing tons of damage to things. Upgrading Strike and Defend is great, and we pick up a Molten Egg and a Power Potion. A little bit awkward that we got a Molten Egg after taking 3 good attacks, but it's fine. Take a rest, we fight the sentries, and we pick up a Girya and a Reaper. So we've won the run already, basically. Genuinely, there isn't that much to talk about from here. This Reaper is going to let us do very unfair things to the game for the next act and a half at least, by which point we should almost certainly have gotten enough stuff together to be able to continue doing unfair things to the game for the rest of the run, is the expectation. I'm not saying it's impossible to lose from here, but I'm saying that that's what we're going to do, and the balance of the game sort of breaks a little bit, where it stops being like, I am trying to solve immediate problems or I will die, which is where the game shines its most. And instead it's like, well, I have a free pass for a really long time. I just have to make sure that I sensibly improve the deck for winning the end boss fight. Which is, you know, not my favorite way to play Spire. There's a lot less going on, a lot less to engage with, but it's still a pretty good game. We actually get 3 lifts in here while fighting an elite, and then heal to 72 in the slime boss fight. Pick up an Exhume Plus, which is, I mean, the upgrade is less exciting when you have Sneko Eye, but still it's a very, very nice card to have with Reaper. And then pick up a Dual Wield Plus on floor 18. At this point, all the deck really needs to win the entire run is a little bit more strength. Oh, also I got a Pandora's Box, which I'm sure gave me all sorts of cool things, but unfortunately it's not going to tell us. Dolly's Mirror, I'm guessing, is a second Reaper. And yeah, at this point, Pocket Watch is a very good relic with Sneko Eye. At this point, I got a Bludgeon Plus in that fight too. At this point, we're pretty much done. The only thing that this deck is sort of missing is help for turn 2 and 3. It's got the Anchor for turn 1, but turn 1 is not turn 2 and 3. A Heart attacks you on turn 2 and 3, of course. And it only has a 75 max HP. So this is a run where my deck's incredibly strong. As we go through all of this, I just am at full health at the end of every fight. But I'm still a little bit spooked at the idea that I can basically play the game for an hour without having to make any decision, and then walk into the heart fight, get a bad draw order, and die. It's a very unpleasant feeling, but I bought a strawberry at the merchant, very, very, very much caring about the stuff that makes me less likely to die. Left the Shield and Spirit fight at full health, which is the best I can do, and we took 67 damage from the heart, although we ended up having almost full health at the end of the fight because we played Reaper after we took the 67 damage. So we got there in the end. So the reason I was talking about how I wasn't playing Spire much and everything... Oh, one more? I guess one more. Yeah, one more. Okay, never mind. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4... Okay, this is the 5th one. Okay, so... Relic Swap, Busted Crown. Busted Crown's not what you want to see in your Relic Swap. This is one of the bad ones, for sure. Busted Crown. It's really hard to win the run when you don't get as many card rewards. It is a deck building game. You build a deck out of cards to try to do strong things, and as strong as Ironclad's interactions with relics are, your cards matter a lot. So when you see a third as many, it makes the game hard to win. I managed to get a Clothesline on floor 1, which is great, it's fine. Skipped a Bloodletting, which is pretty normal. Skipped a Warcry, pretty normal. Got an upgrade on Bash and Clothesline from a floor 4 event, which is incredible. Skipped a Rupture, which I think is a little interesting. I think it's fine. I think it's fine to skip Rupture. If somebody told me that they had thought about it for like 2 hours and felt strongly that you should take Rupture on floor 5 here, I would probably believe that they had come up with reasonable arguments for it. Like, it seems like something you could think about for 2 hours and end up on the decision to pick Rupture here. It's obviously a card that doesn't do anything right now, but if we hit a Combust or a Brutality from a store, it guarantees the ability for us to scale in late game, which is something that is hard to get with a Busted Crown, basically. Unfortunately, it's going to be a dead card a lot of the time, and so I defaulted to just skipping it. If I don't find a way to turn it on, it is bad, obviously. And then the really crazy thing about this run, I looked at this run before recording the video, looked at all of the Ironclad runs before recording the video, is on floor 8 I get a Juggernaut from an Elite fight, which is like, okay, that's cool. It's unusual to be offered rare cards that easily when you have a Busted Crown. But cool, nice. And then I get like an Omamori, whatever, I get a Dreamcatcher. Not a huge great card. Then I got an Offering from the next Elite fight. So I actually got offered 2 rares in a row, which is very hard. The way that the game distributes rares is that when you are offered a rare, the chance of getting a rare for your next card reward goes to -2%. And then every time you're offered a common, it goes up by 1%. So I had a -2% chance to be offered a rare at this Elite fight. Fortunately, on Elite floors, you get a plus 10% default buff. I actually had an 8% chance to be offered a rare, but yeah, still not super likely you're going to hit that, is it? So then I go to the campfire and I rest and I get an Entrench. And I decided to actually take that. It's like an okay card. It has a lot of upside potentially later. Then I go to the next Elite fight and I get a Demon Form. So I got rare, rare, uncommon, rare. It's impossible for me to see a rare here, for what it's worth. Which seemed pretty good looking through this run. I was like, oh, I don't remember this run happening. It was a long time ago, but I imagine that chat was freaking out a little bit at how lucky I was getting here. I managed to pick up an Impervious to go with the Entrench, so that's nice. If I happen to get a Barricade later in the run, or a Calipers even, that could be very powerful. And then I got Snecko. So I'm 4 energy Snecko with a Necronomicon very early on in Act 2, and yeah, just managed to win. This was not a run that was anywhere near as strong as the previous runs. Like, it seems like I'm getting really lucky, right? But it's just, Busted Crown is so bad that I can get this lucky and still have a deck that's significantly worse than the previous run's decks were. But Astrolabe probably gave me some pretty decent cards. Oh nice, it's going to start telling us what cards we get. Shrug It Off, Pummel, and Hemokinesis are not incredible cards, but it's a solid upgrade to the deck strength. We get a Mind Bloom with double Normality, which enabled us to pick up Self-Farming Clay and Kunai. Kunai is an extra nice relic with Necronomicon. Easier to proc it. Orange palettes, Champion Belt, good relics, good relics. I just was playing the entirety of this act with a Normality in my deck, I guess, which actually worked out okay. Very nearly died to the Awakened one. And didn't do too bad at all against the Heart. I imagine this is a really fun run to watch. I wonder if it's on YouTube. I don't know. Maybe. I don't really do my YouTube stuff generally, so I lose track of this, but this run looks sweet. Okay, so I was on 5-0 with Ironclad now, which means that this run has to go 6-0, which would actually be equaling my personal best. I guarantee that I had no idea. I'm almost certain I had no idea. If I did, I really didn't care about Slay the Spire right now and was really enjoying Among Us, because I Boss Relic swapped into Tiny House again, which is, you know, fine, whatever. Does it say what I got this time? No. And then I immediately bought Prismatic Shard on floor 2. So Prismatic Shard has been described generously as worse than just throwing 160 gold away. that's that's I think generally a fair assessment of how good it is to purchase Prismatic Shard on floor 2. However, I think Ironclad's cards are probably worse than all 3 of the other characters' cards. All of the cards is being buffed in general. And it's early enough in the run that if I get something really strong, I could build around it still, probably. So it's not necessarily awful. You get the chance to do this so seldom, and after being offered the chance to do it, you choose to do it so seldom as well, that I don't have a clear idea of how good this is. I just know that I don't think it is very good. Probably giving away the 160 gold and not having Prismatic Shard would be slightly better. is my sense. But anyway, I did that at 5-0. I got a genetic algorithm on the next floor, which is sort of incredible. And I got a Dark Shackles, which is also very good. Upgraded Battle Trance, which I had from Tiny House, I guess. Tiny House must have given Battle Trance. Got a follow-up for a little bit of damage. Bronze Scales is great. Skipped Cool-Headed. And on floor 11 I pick up a Talk to the Hand, which I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say Talk to the Hand may very well be the best card in the game. If it's not, it's very close to being the best card in the game. So our little gamble on Prismatic Shard definitely paid off there. Talk to the Hand gives you block when you attack an enemy. And that looks like it's fair, maybe, but I have a lot of people tell me that they thought that this stopped working at the end of the turn, which it doesn't. It keeps working forever. So if you place it on the heart, you get 3 block every time you attack the heart for the entire fight. Also, it says whenever you attack this enemy, but actually it's whenever you deal damage to this enemy with an attack, which I guess is like more words, so maybe it wouldn't have fit or something. But like if you hit an enemy with Pummel, this Pummel, it procs Talk to the Hand 4 times, and now Pummel blocks for 12. This card's insane. And if you're playing a Prismatic Shard run, I suspect that it's one of the best cards you can possibly be offered, because every character's card pool has attacks. So trying to build attack-based synergies is going to work really well with Prismatic Shard. Got an Apotheosis from Lagavulin's card award, so I have Apotheosis going on as well. And I got a Coffee Dripper with very little sustain at the end of the act, which I think is... This run also looks like it would have been really fun to watch. Again, I don't really remember this run, but clearly some stuff was going on. Some shenanigans. Got a Burning Pact and Zoom, actually picking some Ironclad cards, which is nice. Upgraded our Offering, got Paper Frog. The big thing here is our deck's very strong, and with Incense Burner it gets even better. But it doesn't have any sustain whatsoever, and its ability to block isn't actually very high. Like, has the genetic algorithm, but doesn't have much other than that. So, we're leveraging our Talk to the Hand a lot, I guess. And surviving Act 2, it ends up being actually a really easy act. Didn't have to rest, didn't sustain in any way other than Blood Vial, really, and got through it easily. A Fiendfire and an Entropic Brew from the end. Got a Sozu, which is not a combo with Entropic Brew. You want to make sure that you drink Entropic Brew before you pick up Sozu, so that you actually get the potions from the Entropic Brew. And then went through Act 2. It's really hard for me to make sense of this run, looking at the run history, because I'm like walking through the entire game with a deck that cannot rest, has a bunch of random cards from all the different characters in it, and doesn't really have relics that are that good otherwise. I'm just not taking any damage at any point. I think that I took 8 from the heart. Like, incense burner is a large part of that, I'm sure, but I think the big things that we're doing work here, where battle trance from Tiny House is a much larger deal than it might look like it is to somebody who hasn't played a lot of Ironclad in particular. But the card draw in battle trance is just an incredibly big deal. The genetic algorithm very early on, giving us a turn of invulnerability basically. The Dark Shackles is actually a really big deal too, and then the Talk to the Hand, of course. I think those are the things that are very strong about this deck. If I had to try to make sense of it, which I guess I do. But yeah, this deck is weird. This was a strange run. 6-0. So with that, I tied my personal best win streak for Ascension 20 heart kills with Ironclad. Probably without realizing that I had. I'm gonna guess. This is the run for 7-0. This run actually occurred over a month later, so I'm not thinking a ton about Spire during this time period, obviously. And we Boss Relic swapped into Ectoplasm, and this run Shrug, Disarm, Metallicize, Clothesline, Reaper from the first 5 hallway fights. If you have the ability to take hard hallway fights as Ironclad in the start of Act 1, I think the rewards that they give you are significantly higher than what question marks give you. After floor 6, you start getting better question marks. You get the question mark that lets you fight an extra elite, you get the question mark that lets you fight 3 of the fungi. But before floor 6, your question marks in Act 1 are not that incredible. And typically, building up a chance to get a rare from those hallway fights is going to be really nice. So this is a situation where I just went to 5 hallway fights. I was able to get away with this because of Ectoplasm plus Shrug It Off. Disarm, Metallicize gave me a lot of block, and then Clothesline is nice. I actually took 0 damage from a gang of gremlins despite having basically no attacks here. I had an attack potion, which I probably used here, I guess. And I got paid off this time around by getting the Reaper on floor 5. So, we just have another Reaper Snowball. And yeah, Reaper is very, very, very strong. I would recommend taking a Reaper a lot when you are offered it. Got a feed from the Slime Boss, so now our Reaper Snowball is not only sustaining us, but also we are getting max health as we go through these fights. And we picked up Apparitions on floor 21 to make ourselves invulnerable most of the time while we're doing it. All that a GG, probably. Gremlin Leader fights spooky, because sometimes you'll very easily take 0 damage in, and sometimes you'll actually get hit pretty hard. This deck doesn't have the ability to deal damage very well. I'm surprised I skipped Blood for Blood there. I don't imagine I was playing perfectly, having not played Ironclad for a month. But looking back at it now, I think the thing that the deck mostly needs is a little bit more damage. Dual Wield is nice. Keep on eating things, keep on sustaining as much as I can. Like a Black Star from the end of Act 2. I already have 5 energy, so unless I'm being offered like Snecko Eye or something, taking a 6th energy when I have Choker, which prevents me from playing more than 6 cards per turn, like, you start to have fairly low value on that 6th energy. So Black Star is probably getting taken over pretty much any energy relic here. The stuff that I'd take over Black Star is like Pandora's Box. Yeah, Pandora's Box, Astrolabe probably, Runic Pyramid definitely, probably Snecko Eye. Although 5 energy Snecko Eye with Choker does hurt a little bit, because a lot of the time you'd be able to play more than 6 cards if you didn't have the Choker. Final act. This is Reaper Snowball. And we took 170 damage against Awakened One. What happened? Actually, I think I vaguely remember this run. But yeah, when you have a deck that is surviving off 3 apparitions and can't actually block that well, our relics don't block very well and our cards don't block that well. Do I not have a disarm even? I do have 1 disarm plus, but I guess it wasn't enough to do super well against Awaken One. Make things a little bit tricky. That said, the deck has so much sustain with like Birdface, Stern Magic, Flower, Double Reaper, Dual Wield. If I remember right, the way that this Awakened One fight worked was that I set up a situation where I had a little bit of strength going, and I was just dual wielding Reaper over and over again and playing it lots. And so it says that I took 170 damage, which I believe is true, but I'm pretty sure that the reason for that was that I was blocking by playing Reaper every other turn, or even every turn, instead of by playing block cards. Not actually as spooky as it seems. Upgraded dual wield instead of resting. Sort of interesting choice. I took 92 damage against the shield and spear and ended up at 46 out of 105 going to the heart fight, which is terrifying. And then easily beat the heart, taking only 197 damage. So, yeah. Bit of a strange run, just because the deck didn't really get to a point where it can block, but Reaper excuses a lot of problems that decks can have. There probably wasn't ever any way that this deck would have been able to block well in boss fights. Ironclad just doesn't get offered good block every run. So there's a barricade there. Yeah, maybe I could have put it together. Shrugs and rages and stuff. True grits. But Reaper does the job for us, so didn't need to. And then the final run of the streak, this was to win 8 in a row, which I believe is tied for world record as of right now. Unless somebody did more than that and I missed it. Last time I super cared about this stuff was February. Last time I like really looked into it, but yeah, at least at the time, this was a world record. Is a transform into Runic Dome with an early Toxic Egg. So when you transform into Runic Dome, people have very depending on who you ask, the opinion of Runic Dome is going to be very different. Even among people who have played the game for hundreds of hours, people have very different beliefs about what Runic Dome means. You get people saying the only way you can win with Runic Dome is by building a block deck with Barricade. You get people saying Runic Dome has almost no downside. You get people literally saying Runic Dome has no downside. The truth about Runic Dome is that this game has reference sheets where you can look up exactly what the enemies do. So if you want to know what the enemy can be doing, you can look that up in a reference sheet. But also when you look at that reference sheet, you're going to notice that a lot of the enemies are like, 50% of the time I do this, 50% of the time I do this. Or I do this 30% of the time, but I can't do it 3 times in a row. I do this other thing 60% of the time, but I can't do it twice in a row, and I do this last thing 10% of the time, but I do it more often when I can't do the other things. And you see stuff like that. And the result is that sometimes there is a significant downside to having Runic Dome because you don't know what the enemies are doing. You might be getting attacked for 30, or you might be getting attacked for 0. Probably the most extreme example of this is in the Time Eater fight, where not only could the Time Eater be attacking you for 45 or attacking you for 0 while debuffing you for next turn, but also whenever you play a card, the Time Eater ticks up toward getting stronger. And so not only are you often wasting your card plays in the Time Eater fight, but you're also making the Time Eater strong by doing so. So like, the Runic Relics aren't that great against Time Eater. Runic Dome, Runic Pyramid, they're both less exciting. That said, there is some truth to like the only way you can win is with a block deck. I would never ever say that. I don't think it's right, but if you build a deck which is quite linear, as in it wants to do the same thing no matter what the enemy is doing, Runic Dome has much less of a drawback. As an example, if I build a deck with Barricade and Entrench, and I want to get 800 block and then Body Slam something, that deck doesn't care much whether it's being attacked this turn or not, because it's storing its block every turn. So if it doesn't get attacked this turn, whatever, I'll just have the block next turn, who cares? If I build a deck which is always just playing attacks to kill things as quickly as possible, and it blocks with relics which are out of my control anyway, like Hornclade's going to block for this much on turn 2, Incense Burner is going to make me intangible on the turn that I set it up for, but I didn't know whether I'd be attacked on that turn in advance or not. If I have a deck like that, Runic Dome doesn't have as much of a drawback. These are generally very linear strategies like Runic Dome, which is unfortunate because at Ascension 20 you are rewarded much more so than at lower difficulties for learning how to make non-linear strategies, because Ascension 20 is, as the hardest difficulty, it's the difficulty where linear strategies are the least likely to succeed. Say I build a linear strategy at Ascension 0. I'm just going to attack everything and block with like 1 Impervious and my Incense Burner or whatever. That strategy at Ascension 0 probably wins like 99% of the time or something. Very, very, very high percent of the time. So I'm not actually gaining very much by improving that strategy at all. In fact, if I try to improve that strategy by like adding a bunch of different cards to it and stuff, all of a sudden I might open up the possibility for me to draw bad hands which can't do the general thing that my deck wants to do, and I might actually make my deck less likely to win. Now, when you get to Ascension 20, if I build a deck with a linear strategy, I'm just going to die most of the time. It just doesn't really work that well. This is less true after buffs, much less true after buffs. Building linear strategy decks is much more able to win now that so many cards are stronger, but much less so than at Ascension 0. What's more likely to win at Ascension 20 is grabbing cards which are very good at solving certain situations you're going to be in, and finding a way to play those cards when you're in that situation. And so at Ascension 20, relics like Runic Pyramid are very good. Cards like Well-Laid Plans, very good. Potions like Liquid Memories, very good. Can play a card from your discard pile whenever you need to. Power synergies can be very good because you can be like, oh, I really need to have Feel No Pain in play on a certain turn. But you don't have to draw it on the right turn to have Feel No Pain in play on the right turn. You just have to draw it and then play it, and then it's in play for the rest of the fight. So that's generally what I'm thinking when I have Runic Dome on floor 1. I'm a little bit more inclined toward a linear strategy, but I'm still aware that I'm playing Ascension 20 and linear strategies are going to need to be supplemented by cards which are particularly good at solving certain problems. So I get a Toxic Egg as well on floor 7. Leading up to this, I picked Iron Wave. Solid card, attacks and blocks. You are probably going to benefit from one of those every turn. Picked up a Whirlwind, which is a nice card because it ends fights so often. It's also, when you have a Toxic Egg, Whirlwind goes up in value because it lets you turn all of your energy into damage, which is something that skills struggle with. But you're going to want to add lots of skills to your deck because they're all going to be upgraded, right? So while you're adding all of these sweet upgraded skills to your deck, you do still need to be able to turn your energy into damage somehow. That's largely the role that attacks have when you play Slay the Spire, is letting you turn energy into damage. And Whirlwind lets you turn all of your energy into damage. Whirlwind is not as good of a card when you have a Molten Egg, because you're going to get offered lots of good attacks. And so you already have quite a lot of ability to turn your energy into damage. using those attacks. But when you have a Toxic Egg, this is a great way to get good energy to damage transfer for the cost of 1 card pick and then 1 upgrade. We're gonna want to upgrade this War Wand. This is what we upgrade here. I've usually been upgrading Bash first, and so this is one situation where with 4 energy and the Whirlwind and the Toxic Egg, we're at a point where I've found something else that seems like the more valuable immediate upgrade. Oh, actually, I didn't even have Toxic Egg yet. I just thought that 4 energy Whirlwind was better, which is fair. Sure. Got the Bash second anyway. I probably just looked at it and was like, Sentries is a bad fight for me, and I'm good at Gremlin Knob. Took 0 damage in the Gremlin Knob fight, so I guess I was right. Letter Opener is fine with lots of skills. We got a Sentinel Plus, a Burning Pact Plus, Pommel Strike over Power Through Plus, which I think is interesting. I'm not sure I would make that decision today. And then survived the Hexaghost. I probably needed more damage for the Hexaghost, is probably why I did that. Got a Cursed Key, and we have 5 energy going into Act 2. So, I think this is still a run that's in a pretty interesting place. We don't have a Reaper, we don't have a clear way to snowball, we don't have a feed. Our relics are okay, but our Toxic Egg hasn't really gone off yet. Like, we don't have incredible stuff from it just yet. I did take 18 damage against Shelled Parasite at the start of Act 2, so that's rough. But then I get 3 upgraded apparitions, and all of a sudden it makes the run pretty easy, I think. We go up to 4 on floor 20. When Apparition Event first came out, it had 5, gave you 5 apparitions, and you would just take it every time and win. This was back when the game was quite a lot harder, and it was like a third to 1/2 of your wins probably were from getting the Apparition Event in Act 2, which, looking back at it, is probably a bit high, right? Probably not great. And the devs nerfed it, and I was like, oh, they're finally putting it down to 4, that's nice. And they put it down to 3, and I was like, whoa, that's a lot. That feels like you'd usually not take it now. And then I actually played the game with it nerfed, and no, you just still take it almost every time. What a ridiculous event. Anyway, yeah, apparitions are pretty strong. Got the duplicator for a 4th one, and we are surviving through Act 2 just barely. I had to purchase a fossilized helix and a regal pillow at the floor 24 store. The reason for the regal pillow is so that I can get my health back. I have no sustain, and I'm at 20 out of 36. And keep in mind that rests heal me for, what, 9 right now or something? So, you know, resting up to full health isn't very appealing. Not super likely to get me there. Maybe they heal me for 11. I don't think I ever actually needed to rest for the rest of the run, though. It turns out that 4 apparitions is a lot of apparitions, and then we hit a pretty good Pandora's box, I would say. I think that this is a very good Pandora's box. And just killed all of Act 3. Didn't take any damage anywhere, really. 17 against Time Eater. Well, like I said at the start, Time Eater's rough with Runic Dome. But we were able to kill it in 6 turns and awakened one in 5 turns, so this deck is just dealing a tremendous amount of damage with the double Offering plus, double Burning Pact plus, 2 Dark Embraces to draw more cards, a Corruption, so we very rapidly set up into this obscene Ironclad power Exodia with Exhaust and Corruption, and win from there with the help of our apparitions to just make us invincible. Mummified Hand and a Burning Pact to make it even stronger, and then beat the heart in 7 turns. This deck doesn't have a Feel No Pain, right? It does not. So this deck is significantly harder to win with than it would have been if it had a Feel No Pain. But on the other hand, it has 4 apparitions and an Incense Burner, so plus a fossilized helix. So it's mostly just getting attacked for 1. It's very seldom going to be getting attacked for more than 1. And that was that. 8 Ironclad wins in a row. This was the first of my world record streaks on... This was my second of my world record streaks on this patch. The first was actually Defect. So I was feeling really good about my Spire play at the end of last year. I think I was like fairly easily the highest win rate player in the world, even though I wasn't even playing that many runs. I had 2 world record streaks in that time. It was going super well, and I was, you know, feeling pretty good about how this had all gone, while enjoying playing a lot of Among Us. It was a crazy end of the year. Among Us blew up, of course, and I was playing in lobbies with just super cool people. Sometimes I'd know who they were, and that was pretty insane, but other times I wouldn't even know who they were, and then at the end of the gaming session I'd like look their Twitter up, and they would have like 300 million followers and have cured cancer, and I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't even know we had cured cancer, but I was just playing with some really cool people. My next run was like half a month later, and I think this run I traded into Sacred Bark, which I think is actually okay, especially with Toy Ornithopter. I don't think Sacred Bark is the worst swap you can have, but it's certainly not the best either. Got a Wild Strike, Fire Potion plus Skip, rough to be skipping early. Flame Barrier, which is great. Anger over Thunderclap, which I think is fine with 3 energy especially. And then a Twin Strike just for some more damage going to the elites. I was actually already at 29 by the time that I reached this campfire, so this is the downside of going to all of these hallway fights, right? But I had a Fire Potion, so I was still pretty safe for the elites. I upgraded Bash even. Killed the sentries taking 5, got a Blood Potion, and now I'm at full health again, basically. Blood Potion's pretty good. You don't have to drink it. So we're like going through the entire act not drinking it, basically, but looks like I drank it against Gremlin Knob, got a feed. So we've got a feed snowball run. Was able to upgrade feed, was able to beat Hexaghost, got a Slaver's Collar for 4 energy in elite fights. That's all good. But the problem with these feed snowball runs is that we have to actually get something strong to do with our snowball to win the end of the run. Feed is not going to work by itself to kill the heart, right? And I think that this deck got close. The relics just didn't really come together super well. The cards don't have much card draw in them. I took a Brutality and 2 Evolves to try to get card draw, which is going to work later in fights, but for really explosive strong decks, you want to have cards that draw you cards on turn 1, not on turn 3. By the time you get to turn 3, you may have already taken like 30 damage if you're not drawing cards through your deck quickly. So, this deck's like okay, but just a little bit unexciting. Took 7 damage against Orb Walkers and then 31 damage against Darklings. We're missing a Reaper. With a Reaper, this fight doesn't end up being much of a problem because we Reaper most of that damage back. And then I actually ended up dying to the double Orb Walkers, which is not a mandatory fight. You can choose not to take that one. But with a deck that I was at 58 HP, so usually I expect to be okay in the fight. I don't have much damage in the deck, note, which is why I died. The deck doesn't have many good attacks. But I was expecting to be able to get through this fight okay, especially with double Evolve, 2 Flame Barriers, Corruption. And it just didn't quite happen. The problem is, if I don't go for this fight, I miss out on the rare relic, I miss out on the card reward. I'm not sure exactly what the rest of the act looked like, but I imagine that I was able to rest pretty comfortably to get healthy again. And I will just die. think I probably used a cultist potion in this fight, so I was gaining 2 strength every turn and just didn't draw my attacks at the right time. Could have bought a potion with the merchant here instead of removing strike. Might have been useful. It's easy to look back and think about which things you could have done, but it doesn't even necessarily mean the things I did were wrong. Removing strike is very good in this deck because it's one of the most accessible ways to address our lack of card draw. Getting rid of the cards that you don't want to draw is solving that problem, like, sort of from the other direction. And that's one of the main reasons that removing strikes is so powerful. Card draw is just incredibly good, and it's hard to find it sometimes, but you can always click on the remove a card and take a strike out of your deck and sort of find it that way. So, not too upset that I only, you know, had a world record streak on Ironclad. It's fine, I guess. It's always interesting when you end a streak and a lot of people are like sad because they were invested in the streak, but for me, it's always been a mix of like, well, I'm really happy that that happened because it was insane, super cool, really proves that you have a level of mastery and commitment to playing a character that nobody else in the world has, really. Maybe 1 or 2 other people. But yeah, I don't really get sad that it's gone. There's also a sense of like relief that I don't have to stress out about whether I win or lose runs anywhere near as much anymore, because it just doesn't matter as much when I'm not on an 8 streak. So I hope you enjoyed this analysis of the runs. I talked about lots of different cards and stuff. I know that I didn't do many visual aids and stuff. It's more of like a podcast format video almost. I'm a full-time streamer. I don't have a video editor. Any attempts that I've made to hire someone to actually edit my videos have been pretty underwhelming. I think this is a type of content which is very hard to take shortcuts through. You sort of have to talk all the way through all of it very slowly, unfortunately, or else things that are important start getting left out pretty quick. So I hope you enjoyed this. Intend to be back with a look at the silent streak next. And then there's Defect, and then there's 2 different rotating world records. I set it, and then it got beaten, and then I hit it again. And then I didn't technically set a Watcher world record. The Watcher world record is 18-0, but I went 18-1, which is pretty cool. I thought it would be worth looking at those runs. Pretty obscene that while I was setting the rotating world record twice and individual character world records, I also got really close on the 4th character. Watcher's never been my favorite character. And I'm currently on a 9-0 streak with Watcher as well, so maybe in another couple of weeks or so, I'll have an actual Watcher world record to share. Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I hope this was insightful and useful. I don't get that much of a chance to just talk at incredible length about what I think about different runs and stuff when I'm playing. There's just a lot of other stuff going on. So this is a nice chance for me to get to solidify some of my thoughts for you and explain what's going through my mind as I look at these runs and think about how the characters win. I'll see you next time.